Welcome back, everybody. Happy Thursday. Sorry, I sometimes can't type and talk at the same time. On. Mary, you're out my uncle's way, not too far from him, actually. Hello, good afternoon. Happy Thursday. Sorry if it's not afternoon where you are. If it is, good morning. It happens. Sydenham, Ontario, right out by Kingston. If you're joining us for the first time, please say hello. Let us know where you're coming from. How's everybody doing today? Here in Toronto, we're on the humid side. It's sort of humid, sort of not. It's in a weird area right now, but it is beautiful, sunny. We're supposed to go up. Temperature is supposed to fly up over the next couple of days. Hello, California, Massachusetts. I see Toronto, a lot of Toronto happening there. Hello, PA. Been a while. San Antonio, Texas. Glad to have everybody back. Very, very excited to talk a little bit more with our special guest. Won't give it away quite yet, about trauma, bringing it back in with how it wraps up with early childhood educators, and early education. Hello, Windsor, Victoria, BC. I'll be out that way over the weekend, not in Victoria, Sarley, but going to Vancouver for a little sneak flyby there. Should be nice. Hopefully the weather is good. New York, Queens. Hello. Down into it. New Orleans. I love seeing where you guys are coming from. That's probably like this. I love this pre-show part. It's a lot of fun. Welcome if you're just coming and joining with us here. We'll dive into the info here. And in 2 or 3 minutes, we will actually get started. So if you haven't had a chance to get a glass of water, you still have a minute or two to get rocking and rolling. And if you're comfy, well, just stay there. Hello, PA again, Philadelphia, I saw. The Bronx, New York. Very excited. Hope everyone's doing well. Here in Ontario, update from last week's numbers. We're on the down, going down, slow yet surely on the case numbers. If you haven't followed anything in Ontario, we're doing like a phased reopening. And Toronto itself is not into its third phase yet, but fingers crossed soon. Hope everyone is healthy and well, doing good there today. We'll get started in a minute or two here. We are just gonna let everybody's trickling in. I don't want anyone to miss anything, but just getting into it. Hello, Austin, Texas. Hi, Jasmine. Welcome back. Rhonda, I see you there from New Orleans. Beautiful. Florida, Miami. I saw like 3 Floridas in a row, but I didn't get them all. I do apologize. It's exciting to have everyone joining us here. I hope you're repeat visitors. If not, welcome for the first time. Webinar should be very exciting. I'm very excited about our guest, and I'm very excited to talk a little bit more about this. Being informed about trauma and being informed about how powerful it's going to be over the next coming, not just even months, I want to say years, and sadly, but we'll see. We will see. Hello. I saw Angela. Hello. Welcome back. 1 more minute or two here. We'll get started. Settle on in. Hope everyone's well. It's your first time. Oh, okay. If you're first time people here, pro tip from me. I'm so bad with names, saying names, reading them. I do my best. So if I do say your name wrong for any reason, please don't be offended. It's just not my strongest suit there. So before we dive in and get all into the details that we're going to cover today and everything, a couple of things. If you ever do need to refresh, please, if for some reason it's frozen or anything, just make sure to refresh. You'll be good to go. We do record this, so if for some reason you have to jump off, whether you have a call or anything like that, don't be shy. We also do give out certificates. We'll explain all of that at the end, so don't be shy here. Let's get into the details and get going. Hello, Sarah from Vancouver. I'll see you soon. I'm just kidding. If you've never ever participated with us before, my name is Ria. I'm one of the early childhood educators here at Hi Mama. I work on our beautiful marketing team here with my coworker Carmen, who is the one on the chat box. So say hi to Carmen. Carmen, guys, is in our office today. she's doing her house is getting some work done. So seeing her in the office is making me a little jealous, but at the same time, I bet it's a little sad at the same time. It's very empty, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels a bit weird, but it's what it is.
Exactly. Slow yet sure will be there. So yes, any questions, Carmen's your lady. You can message her directly, or you can just pop it into the chat. But let's bring on our beautiful special guest. Everybody, Charlie is a local lady with us here, a beautiful woman, mom of 3 boys. I'm so sorry. I'm kidding. Tons of experience. Charlie is going to be talking to us a little bit more about trauma, about how it affects children, how, things that you can do to talk a little bit more about it. Charlie, come on with us here and we'll let you say a couple of words and add to the intro for yourself.
Well, hello. How are you guys today?
There's lots of chat coming in. Everyone's saying hello to you so far here in the chat. Tell us a little bit, maybe just about yourself before we dive into all the nitty gritty, Charlie.
Yeah, well, I do live in the Niagara region of Ontario. I did see a few people come on from Ontario and someone from Niagara. So hello. From Kentucky, so I am American. Got a couple of lenses here. And I am a mom of 3 boys. It is wonderful, actually, because I have 3 sisters and oh my goodness, I don't know how I would do with girls.
Hey, that's fair. I think that's a common one. Most moms, I feel like, say the same thing. I'm not there yet, but I feel like most moms would say the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know what? I've been an educator for over 18 years. I've worked in New York State. I started off in elementary and then my career brought me to the high school level, but my background is in child development and I don't know. I mean, I've got a master's in education. Listen,
how big is your wall with all of the?
No, well, you have to build some credibility. So I do have a little background in education, but the most important thing is I've been doing mental health for a long time. My curriculum allows me to do the research. So I've been researching child development. I teach parenting classes and I concentrate on 0 to 6 years old. And I get to see how these kids turn out as teenagers. So starting even in the womb is so important. And so that's why the education piece is important. But mental health is also a piece of what I do.
That's fantastic. Lots of experience from Charlie. Before we dive into all the fun stuff, we always have to just make sure if anybody is here, this is sadly not the face of legal advice. You never wanted it to be the face of legal advice, let me tell you. Anyways, just so you know, and make sure all of our I's are dotted, T's are crossed. If you are looking for anything, like maybe just to seek out your financial advisor, just to make sure if you're looking for licensing rules, call into your local rep. Just make sure you're getting the right advice from the right people. Here, ideally, we want you to take tips and tricks and things that you can implement to try and help you out. Whether you're working in the center now, whether you're still working from home, whatever location you are at in this crazy world we live in right now, maybe just to make it a little bit better. So a couple of things we're going to go through with Charlie. Obviously, we're going to talk about COVID-19 and trauma and kind of how they affect each other, talk about adverse childhood experiences. This always interested me when I was going through school. It was always something I spent a little bit more time reading about. And then, of course, going into like the effects on the mind, the effects on the, and kind of how you can take that lens, change it up, a couple of tools and tricks from Charlie as we go through. I'm excited, Charlie. This is going to be fun.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I really am.
I'm super pumped. So tell us about exactly what trauma is and then how we should maybe be applying it when reopening right now, or if we're fully open, how we can work it into the classroom.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of circumstances out of our hands, so we're going to have to roll with it, and that's what we do when we're educators and parents and leaders. So the idea of trauma is not new, but it is becoming a new idea in the school system and in the community. So anytime somebody has perceived a threat or there has been a real threat on their life or their well-being, that is trauma. Now, there are lots of different definitions, but they all kind of come back to that. And so there's a fear or there's a feeling of hopelessness or helplessness. And so part of the way that we treat trauma is empowering the person who's experienced it. And what's so important is that in 2017, the CDC did a national survey, and they found that over 50% of our children in the United States, which usually transfers to Canadians as well, over 50% of our children have experienced at least one serious childhood trauma. And so they're showing up to our classrooms, and we don't know that they've experienced the trauma. Yeah.
That's a huge number. Like
It's
that is, it's more than I ever want it to be. That's for sure. I think we'd all want it to be at 0. We got to work to get down there. So maybe in centers reopening right now, like if they are looking at reopening or they're just reopened, maybe what are a couple of things they can look at in regards to the reopening process and potentially thinking about trauma as they do reopen? Because we all know COVID-19 has been traumatic, no matter what age you actually are right now. But maybe what's a couple of things they should be considering as they do bring the children back to the center?
So kids always communicate through behavior. Their bodies show up and shows their behavior when they don't have the language, and they don't have the sophisticated language when, of course, 0 to 6. Especially working with preschoolers, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, they don't have that complex language all the time. So we're looking for signs and symptoms that show up in the body and in behavior. And so it could go anywhere from having a loss of appetite, they're easily startled, difficulty concentrating, focusing, outbursts of anger, irritability. Now, some of these things, you're sitting there thinking, well, that could be my child is tired. Yeah, that's possible. They could be hungry. Yeah, they could be missing somebody. Absolutely. So the other 50%, or at least what we don't know, there are kids who are hungry, tired, and there's other things going on. Sometimes there's autistic behavior underlying that, ADHD, special needs. Okay, so we're looking at the kids who, remember, over 50% of them are sitting in our classrooms or our buildings, or we're engaging in them. Sometimes they're saying that they have headaches or stomach aches. So it's actually a physical manifestation in their bodies, and they don't know how to make sense of it. So their bodies are communicating with us. So we need to look for these things. And sometimes they're even shaming themselves, or they're using language that is inappropriate for their age, or that they've learned it from somewhere. So some of these kids, unfortunately, have been through abusive situations or some sexual abuse. So if they're using words around that seem off, they might be emulating what they've seen or what they've heard. So that's something that you can just take note of. It's important that we understand their baseline behavior so that we can look for different patterns that will be showing up when we're working with them. And I haven't even talked about COVID. I haven't talked about hand washing. We don't, that's the safety measures for sure. You got to do that. But we're looking at these kids from a different perspective.
For sure. I actually want to dive in a little bit more into those numbers a little bit with you, because you're saying that this is from 2017, right? So what was about the 33% have had more types of childhood adversity? Maybe dive into what these two numbers are really telling us.
Yeah, that's great. And by the way, we're in a pandemic, so those numbers will change, and probably for the worse. No matter what kind of support we have, right? They're seeing it on the news. That could be a trauma. There's different types of trauma. Yeah. And one of them is being able, witnessing it, being a victim, but witnessing it. And sometimes when we see things on TV, like after 9/11, that was a traumatic experience for some children. Some kids who are really little, who see a zombie movie or a scene, it's looping in their brain. They're holding on to it. Their limbic system part of their brain, the emotion part of their brain, it just loops in there. And that's why if they don't have treatment, they're continuously on that loop, and then it gets triggered. And we'll talk about the brain science here in a little bit too. But 33% is really important too. So there's something called the ACEs study. There's a study that was done in the later 90s called from Kaiser Permanente in California. And those of you from California in this field probably have heard of this.
Yeah.
And everywhere, right? It's everywhere. So ACEs, it's an adverse childhood experience. And that can be anywhere from transitioning from one home to the next, divorce, lots of different categories of experiences that when a child faces adversity, that is on the scale of what the child has experienced. So what they did is they linked those adversities to physical health, and they followed these people into adulthood, and they realized that people who had heart disease, people who had gut problems, any kind of disease in their body, cancers, diabetes, they linked them to their actual ACEs score. So one of the things that you can do is in your own school is do an ACEs test and see where your kids are, what's going on with your kids, your population. And I would take that a step further and say, ask your staff, What is your staff's ACEs score? Because we've got to look out for each other. When we have staff, you need to make sure that they're in a very sound place. We were talking before this started, and we were talking about how teachers are actors and they've got to be on. But good leaders, and you guys are here because you're leaders. Good leaders look out for their staff just as much. So there's a whole program you can do, but you have to see who's in your building. And when these kids get older, these ACEs follow them. And so they found that kids who had, like most people have 1 to 2 at least ACEs, adversities. But as the number goes up, they found that if you have 4 or more, your issues with mental health skyrocket. Your issues with physical health skyrocket. Suicide attempt or completions like skyrocket. So it's a huge problem. It's an economic problem.
Yep.
It's a social problem. Yeah.
For sure. We've had a really good question here that is that I think is very fitting for right now. It's from Gisela, which I've said, if Charlie, if you didn't catch it, I'm really bad with names. Can trauma be the way one perceives an event? So she's example is one event may traumatize you because of whom you are, but it may not traumatize me. I might be fine with it. Is that possible? Or
yes, absolutely, because it's a perceived event. So think about those kids you have in the classroom, or think about yourself. So think about something that bothers you or that you are alerted to as a threat. And somebody else would be like, what are you talking about? So let's say I've actually known somebody who really was disturbed going over a bridge. She couldn't go over a bridge because something happened. We need to talk about implicit memory too, which we'll get to, working with your kid population. But something happened and she couldn't cross a bridge. And when I say couldn't, her body physically wouldn't let her. This is a body response. This isn't your child, acting out, trying to manipulate you, because they do that too to get what they want. This is different. And this is an automatic body response. She couldn't cross the bridge. She had to get treatment so she could tell her, the brain science behind it is the amygdala. A lot of you know about this, is the threat. And it's telling her, this is a threat. You need to avoid this or fight it. The whole fight, flight, or freeze response. And when you're in severe trauma, sometimes they faint. So absolutely. So one person's perception can be different. And that's why trauma is your perceived threat or a real threat. Yeah. Good question. Great question.
No, that's a fantastic question. And actually, I feel like it helped me out even a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more. I know we were talking about this previously about like identifying trauma in young children. We were talking about like the physical things. Are there any like huge indicators that something, maybe obviously besides the signs of physical abuse, which I hope no one has to handle, but on the same time, we know it happens.
Yes.
But what are maybe some big indicators that educators can look out for, especially if maybe the child's a nonverbal child?
Right. Okay. So the big one there for me would be clinginess. So there's attachment issues when there's abuse. So there's attachment and trauma, and they go together because when we attach to others, adults who are our caregivers, doesn't have to be the parent, it can be a caregiver, which is why you are so important. And so are your teachers, because they can get through that with resiliency. If so, it's the clingy. So sometimes they're very clingy, overly clingy. Again, sometimes this is being tired. Sometimes they're going through a move. And that's a transition. That's an adversity. That's one of those ACEs. And so that might explain it. Okay. But sometimes they're avoidant of their caregiver. And aside from the obvious bruises, like little kids get bruises on their shins, like that's normal.
Yep.
But different places, on their arms. I even tell this to my teenagers to look out for their friends who have the tracking on their arms. If somebody's grabbed them, right? If they're falling asleep too much and I know they're little 3 and 5 year olds and you have nap time, but if they're falling asleep a lot more as a pattern, now this might not be a one-off. This is a pattern. That's why you have to know their baseline. That's helpful. Something like that. Or if they're constantly asking for food and the others are not, why? I would ask those questions. Why is this kid hungrier than the other kids? And there might be logical explanations for that, but we can't ignore those. That's what we have to look for. A lot of physical responses, very angry outbursts. So let me say something about that.
Yeah.
Kids throw tantrums. They do. We know that. It's hard to deal with. But what we usually do when they throw tantrums is we remove them from the situation. And what the trauma treatment and research, there's tons of research supporting that we need to connect with them. And what's going on in their brain is they're not using the thinking part of the brain. And I go like this because the cerebral cortex of your brain is the
Yes.
thinking part.
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah. And the prefrontal cortex, which is here, most of us know this, is not fully developed till you're about 25 years old, mid 20s. A few different numbers around that. And so what we need to do is understand that their limbic system, their emotions are responding. And that's why it's showing up in their behavior and their outbursts. So what we need to do is have them tap into that thinking part of their brain so that we can have them pull them. I always call it, let's pull yourself together. And that way we can integrate. And a guy named Dr. Dan Siegel, which again, a lot of people have heard about, he's got a fantastic book, several books, called The Whole One, specifically everybody needs to read if you have a child or if you have access to a child, The Whole Brain Child. And it helps.
Oh, yes.
You've heard about him?
I've heard about this book. I haven't read it yet, but okay, but keep going though. The Whole Brain Child.
It's okay. Yeah. Get it on audio. I'm busy. I never sit down and read a book, but I've got audio. It's in my car. It's my podcasts are great. Audiobook. And it's not one of those books that'll ever be boring. It's got techniques. It explains it in a way that you can understand it, and it'll capture you, and it'll help you understand why it's so important that we need to really address how we're looking at our kids and responding to our kids. We need to do that differently, for sure.
I think this is a great tie, Charlie, actually, because I feel like we're talking about the brain. Let's talk. I lost my mouse here. Talk a little bit more about the brain, because of course the mind, the body, they work in tandem no matter what age you are. But tell us a little bit more about the actual brain being affected by trauma, and then how, like we were talking about some of the body side effects a little bit earlier, but how they as well affect when you are working through trauma.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all linked. We all know mind, body, emotions, they're all linked. Yep. And the medical field isn't always up to date with this. And that's why we need this education for them too. So I mentioned implicit memory before, and this is so essential because we're working with little kids, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, 1-year-old, they don't have that language, right? 2-year-old, they don't really have that language. So they're holding on to something. If they've been through some kind of trauma, they're holding on to that in their implicit memory, meaning they can't recall that information. It's just kind of looping in there. And then when something triggers them, they're going to respond. Well, when our kids throw a fit and we know they're not being manipulative and we're like, where's this coming from? Something's triggered that implicit memory. And that's how we have to respond. The hardest thing to do is to be calm yourself and not get angry at your child. But what we do is we need to realize this is an automatic system in your body. Your brain regulates your body. Your brain sends messages through your whole body, through your nervous system. And so you can imagine why people shake or why you feel sick to your stomach. It starts from your brain and it goes all the way down into your body, the different systems. And the whole body system is related. So if that implicit memory is triggered, the child's going to respond. And so we need to change how we respond to them. And I know you caregivers are awesome at being calm and working with those kids, but instead of removing them, we need to understand this is very brain-based. And so that automatic response needs to be addressed differently. So sometimes like touching it, like with our teenagers who are, I'll explain something here in a minute called flipping your lid from Dan Siegel. That's a whole thing. We'll get there. But like my older teens, when I see that they're in that response stage, that whole fight, flight, or fight, I don't touch them because they might fight me off. And that would be my fault. That would be my fault at that, because it's a nervous response, right? Think about, you don't want someone touching you. And some kids will, because their brain is telling them this is a threat, then they're going to go hide or withdraw. Okay, so let's go back to the brain for a second. So you have the limbic system. Yep. Well, we'll go here. So, and this is a Dan Siegel, now Star Commonwealth trained me in trauma as well. And they have a little bit different imagery and a story you can actually share with your kids. You need to share this with your kids so they understand it and you have the common language. So you have the brainstem. This is where, your brain is telling the rest of your body to breathe and to feel things, right? Tell your stomach if you're hungry or not. It's a brain-based. So then you've got the amygdala, which is a part of your limbic system. So we show kids this model and we teach them that this is your limbic system, the part where your feelings and emotions are regulated or sitting. This part where your thumbnail is your amygdala. So this is detecting the threat, perceived or real. It's actually a part of your brain. There's a ton of research and brain science evidence to support all of this. And then if you close your hand, right? If you close your hand, this is the cerebral cortex. This is the thinking part of your brain. Your brain develops from the back to the front. So think on the back, your cerebellum is there. That has to do a lot with balance. Well, what is one of the first things kids learn to do? To walk, right? To sit up, crawl, creep,
Whatever.
cruise, and walk. Okay. You move
along.
yeah. And your limbic system is kind of midbrain. It's kind of sitting in there. So the front prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex up front, your planning, the organization, problem solving, thinking things ahead before you understand their consequences, that develops last. And we know that about mid-20s, that's when that's fully developed. So you're working with little kids here who are responding emotionally, and it's a body and brain response. So with trauma, this amygdala is on high alert. So do I have time to give you a case study, like talk about it?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like it ties really well. And I feel like I don't even need to ask the third question because I feel like you've already gotten into it. And I feel like questions that are coming on chat are also really tied well. So keep going, Charlie. Tell us about the study.
Okay, but feel free to interrupt me because it's fine. Okay.
Don't you worry.
Okay.
I will.
So imagine these two scenarios. So one little boy, his mom comes to get him saying, look, I can't get in touch with grandma. We need to go over to grandma's house. So this little boy's 4, goes over with his mother to his grandma's house. They go into the kitchen. It seems disheveled. Something doesn't seem right. The little boy goes over to the refrigerator, opens the door, and his grandmother, who's deceased, falls on top of him.
Oh, God.
That's a real story. A comedian told me we could actually use this. We'll talk about him. His name's Frank King, but it actually happened to him.
Oh, my goodness.
And he didn't get treatment and had to show up in class the next day. So imagine your little 4-year-old showing up to your classroom the very next day. Something like that happened. Okay. Imagine what behaviors might come out of that. Another boy, this guy's a real guy too. His name is Johnny Crowder. And he actually has been abused since birth. And this kid showing up. Yeah. And we know this happens. It's unfortunate. We don't like it. We need to do a better job in society for sure. It's costing us a lot of money, a lot of energy, and our poor kids shows up to your classroom every day and you don't know that he's going home being abused. And here's the kid that's quiet and withdrawn because he's learned at home that when his dad pulls up in his truck, when he hears it, he runs into his bedroom and is as quiet as he can and goes unnoticed. So when he shows up to your classroom, he wants to be as invisible as he can because his amygdala shows that when he's not detecting a threat when he's quiet. Now, if you walk over to him when he's at his desk or he's working with blocks or doing sorting, and it startles him, his amygdala might detect a threat because there's a noise. It's different. It's loud. He might respond in those various ways I mentioned before.
Yeah. And to think about too, about how traumatizing it was, like it trauma itself, I feel like we've become more aware, but we're still not aware enough of, to think about like the 2 little boys you were talking about in the stories there, that it really wasn't a thing to even think to get some sort of help for them. And then yet they have to deal with it those years later and figure out how to actually go back and fix it within themselves, whether they seek help or they, whatever path they choose to do. There's been a really good question that I think actually ties well into what we're talking about right now. So Sharon, she says, hello, Charlie. So when you become aware of the trauma, and maybe if you, I guess, you're pretty certain something is happening, what do you recommend for the process for disclosing this information? So maybe what would be the process you think would be to go best with finding out?
Yeah, and that's hard to say because every state, every area, every region, they would have a different process to use. And so I'm really cautious with that kind of process. But the most important thing is do not ignore it. And sometimes your school, gratefully, I hope, has a school social worker or a school psychologist, even a guidance counselor. Those people are there. They are trained. They're trained. And if not, I suggest, especially as a result of this pandemic, ask for funding to get a social worker into your school at least once a week. Gosh, it needs to be full time. But I'm in the social work program. I'm almost finished with my clinical work. I'll be done in the fall. And I'm telling you, the lens I have as a social worker in a clinical setting addresses this much better than anybody could possibly do. And I'm not saying that psychologists and guidance counselors can't have that training too. But what I'm saying is we're taught to look at the environment. And so psychologists have great training too. They'll be able to respond. Get a mental health professional into your school somehow, at least access. So it depends on what it is, but you have an obligation. I mean, you have an obligation, mostly legal obligation. I mean, if we're in this field, we do.
Yep.
So you have to tell, and if you're the leader, sometimes there's a call to the police you have to make, or CPS or fax. And in Canada, it's fax. In the United States, CPS. Yeah, we have an obligation. And guess what? We have a social responsibility. We are with these kids. Sometimes these kids are going home to that abuse or that trauma, and their parents are not equipped with dealing with it, noticing it, or being able to manage it. And so it truly takes a village. We all have to help our kids. If we all are in this together, look at the change that we can make in the future of humanity. Truly, I look at this not just like on a micro, small scale individual. Look what you're doing for society. Yeah. These kids can grow up and not have abuse, not be abusive in their own relationships, not have drug addiction, not have crime. I mean, teenagers, at least 1 out of 3, and I would argue 1 out of 2 relationships as teens are unhealthy, at least, and a lot of them are abusive. And if we can just teach how to self-regulate and show up to other people better and interrelate better, we're going to have a better society. So
I agree. And I totally agree with the lens being not just small, but as well putting on your bigger lens. Yeah. With that, I actually want to we're going to talk about the lens. I know a couple of people have been asking me about it, but before we do, to tie into, tell us about the animals inside me. On a side note, when I looked at all 3 of these pictures, I was like, these things are so freaking cute, but that's just where I went right away. This is an activity to help run us through what's going on here.
This is great. So Star Commonwealth, so star.org, STARR, has tons of resources. Okay. This is where this came from. So I taught you before about the Dan Siegel, the flip your lid. By the way, when kids' brains go offline and that amygdala is on high alert, you flip your lid, you're not thinking straight. So you can't even reason with a kid. I didn't even say that before. You can't reason with a kid. You know this. You can't reason with you when you flipped your lid, right? No. You can't reason. So you gotta get a kid back online, and you can use that language, or I say pull yourself together or find your calm, so that you can access the reasoning part of their brain and help what's called integration to help them make more positive neural connections, and what's going to help them for their lives. This is a different way of looking at this. This is how you can teach kids through story. Okay, so you've got the meerkat, the tiger, and the owl. So remember, you've got the brain stem. So this is the way Star Commonwealth talks about this. So the meerkat is the amygdala. The meerkat kind of comes out of the hole and looks around to look for any threats, right? And so that's the amygdala. When it is on high alert, then the tiger is like the limbic system, the whole system. And so what does a tiger do? Well, it's just, if it's normal, it's kind of just hanging out, maybe sleeping, whatever. Observant. But observant, right? Yeah. Whatever. And then when the meerkat detects a threat, the tiger comes out. Well, the tiger is either going to run away or the tiger is going to fight, right? And so that's how they tell the story. So when your amygdala, when you think that there's some kind of threat around you, your tiger is either going to run away. Okay, it's going to either run away or it's going to fight. Well, here's where the owl comes in. So the owl is the thinking part of your brain. And so when your meerkat detects a threat, the tiger's out, the owl flies away, and you can't think anymore. You can't access that part of your brain anymore. And so you can teach your kids that, okay, your owl flew away, your thinking flew away. So now we need to really tame the tiger so that we can get you back to thinking straight, so we can help you.
That is a very unique way of thinking about it. And I think for me, it's probably actually going to finally stick. I didn't do well in biology class. Just so you know, didn't take it. That's probably why. And yeah, I love that. It's a really cool way to think about it, and to think about where the children are at. Like in my head, I think about being in the classroom, or I even think about my niece and my nephew. And if that owl is flying away and my niece is, at this stage right now, there's no reasoning. Like you might as well just let her do her thing until she's ready to actually, talk to, or the 8-year-old calm it down a little bit more and bring his cat back.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've had that in many different experiential settings. So
Yeah.
talk about, because this is amazing, I think, let's talk about the lens. There's been a ton of questions about what the trauma lens is. And I feel like this has both a personal, like the personal point and this societal point. Maybe start with the personal one and then maybe jump in with how the bigger lens works.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do you get frustrated with the kid who's having an outburst and you're like, oh my gosh, just make this kid stop. And it's making you feel on edge yourself. And so a lot of times, what do we want to do? We want to just get them to stop any way we can, or we want to remove them or punish them, right?
Yep.
Like, stop doing that. Calm down. It doesn't work. We know the brain science isn't there because that owl flew away or they flipped their lid. They can't access the thinking part. You're not rationalizing that. They're not going to just calm down. In fact, a lot of times what happens, it makes it worse, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So what do we need to do? There's strategies around that. But before we get to strategies, it's important to understand that we need to see that child. And instead of react, what we need to do is stop and think.
Yep.
So the trauma lens allows us to say, like, we get curious. We're like, I wonder what's happened to that child. Or I wonder what is happening to that child.
Yep.
So you remember that little kid who I told you, whose grandmother fell on top of him. Well, what happens if it's snack time and he hears the refrigerator door opening and his amygdala is on high alert now and he wants to get up and run out of the bathroom because he's in flight mode, or run to the bathroom or run out of the room. I mean, and again, this isn't every kid. We're not saying all behavior is trauma-based. We're saying over 50% of our kids have experienced at least one serious trauma or have adversity, right? The ACEs. So there's something else that might be going on. So we're going to ask, I wonder what happened. So we're going to get curious, because that way we're a lot more forgiving. And we also have to understand the trauma lens. They're not trying to do this to be jerks or bad.
No.
They don't want to be bad kids.
No.
Okay. So we need to, we just need to support them better and come at it differently. The other thing is, we don't want to remove kids if we don't have to. Now, there are circumstances that is like the last thing you do.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's the first thing we do. So the trauma lens says, look, we need to connect with these kids. And so you all know this. You are already down at the kids level, but I challenge you to stay there and sit with them. That kid probably doesn't want to be touched, but sometimes touch is so powerful, it might help, but we're in COVID, so that won't work. So now you're 6 feet away. So we have to mitigate that.
Yep.
But eye contact will be huge. You can see each other, and eye contact builds intimacy and trust, and very quickly. So that is one of the ways you're going to use a trauma lens in that kind of situation. The other situation, or do you want me to stop for a second?
No, keep going. I'm loving this. I'm watching the chat and people are asking some great questions, and keep going, my girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other kid then is the little boy, little Johnny. He's the one who's quiet. Remember, he wants to be as invisible as he can.
Yeah.
And you're frustrated with him because you're trying to get this kid to do new activities with you. You're trying to say, hey, look at this train set. I got this train set. Come on over and play. Or he's not engaging with his peers. And you know that's a problem, because social development is huge from 3 to 5 years old, and at any age. So you're frustrated. So I challenge you again to say, I wonder what has happened to that little boy, or I wonder what is happening. Because if his body is responding, one, he's not choosing that. It's an automatic response. It's brain-based.
Yep.
What can we do then to help support him?
That's huge.
Like
everything you said, Char, I'm just like taking it in right now and thinking about it.
Good.
And
We
processing
need
it.
to. We need it.
There's actually been a really good question, because talking about touch, and then of course, right now with COVID, they're limiting the touch as much as possible. But Barb has asked, like how can a teacher, if you have any tips, I know we're about to jump into some tips and things like that, but how can a teacher make children feel safe without the touch? So I know you'd already mentioned eye contact. Do you have is there any other things we potentially could look at?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Kids, as you know, respond to your responses. So the best thing you can do if a kid is crying or throwing a fit or doing something the class doesn't like, because we know how that goes.
Oh yeah.
The way you respond is how they're going to respond or learn to respond to that kid. The worst thing you can do is isolate or further isolate, because we're all feeling isolated. Imagine these kids feeling further isolated in their classroom when they might be going home and already feeling alone there. So we need to make sure that we include. So we can use language, we can use the eye contact. Again, we don't want to tower over kids. We want to get to their level and stay there as much as we can, especially at this age. I do this even with teens. I make sure I even get down to their level because there's an issue of power there. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing we want to do is empower these kids. Tone of voice is going to be huge. You've got to watch your tone of voice. It can be very threatening to kids when your tone of voice emulates a tone of voice that their caregiver has that might be neglecting or abusive. And I know that's a lot to put on you. Mm-hmm. If you can be calm and loving and always show up that way, you're going to be fine, right? Because somebody's abusing, someone else is not loving and that calm. I mean, I was actually in an abusive situation before and they were calm, but they were saying really horrible things in my ear. So but if it's a loving tone of voice and then the words, just be cautious, especially if you notice a kid who shows patterns of these difficulties showing up. And I say like another strategy is we're in COVID, right? So I know that they need to be social. So some things we can do are like, I draw pictures for each other and engage in social things like that. I think it would be really cool to do like a time capsule. Again, that connection piece is huge. So if everyone can kind of make something for a time capsule or share, one thing that's huge is showing gratitude. And you can teach little ones to do this. So you have them say, I've really liked that Kara said something very nice today about Johnny. I mean, showing gratitude we know is huge too. So, and supporting each other, like that self-care is big. There's lots of things we can do. The one strategy we're going to have to adapt to for COVID is these kids are going to need some self-regulation tools. A lot of you already do this in your classroom. Mm-hmm. What we always say for the trauma lens is to have a comfort corner, but that's going to be challenging for cleaning and stuff. So a bean bag, for example, that needs to be there. If you can do this, it'd be great to put a beanbag chair in the corner so that but a vinyl one that can be wiped down. Yeah. Right? Like things like that. And then I'd say like a personalized basket that they can access to help them with those self-regulation tools. There's a lot. Yeah. There's just
definitely a hard piece right now with COVID, but so diving into the tools. I get with us that comfy space has always, I feel like, been a part of everybody's classroom. It's part of my favorite piece of my classroom was having as much comfiness in there. But of course, it's, a little hard right now, but I think there's definitely ways around it. So walk us through a couple of tools, a couple of strategies. These were some Charlie had offered up to us, but you add on to this, please. Like, I'm sure that we don't have all the time in the world, but
no, and I'll be very cognizant of that.
No worries.
The idea here is I do wonder if we couldn't create some space because the idea of the trauma lens is the empowerment. And so you never, ever in the trauma lens. Now you're used to traditional ways. We're talking the trauma lens. Yep. You don't send a kid to a space to calm down. You give them the option. You say, what do you need? Remember, we're first asking, I wonder what happened to this child, and ask them what they need. Little kids know how to tell you what they need, not always with their words. Sometimes they show you. So if they have this, like I always say in this whole COVID time, and I'll do this with teenagers, it's their own personalized basket of tools. So what's in the other kids' tools may not be in this kid's tools. So we have to understand what helps that particular kid self-regulate and let them have choices. You could do these as projects. I mean, you could get a water bottle. It shows you how to recycle. You get water and you sprinkle it. And a lot of you probably already do this. Let us know in the comments if you do. I'm sure you do.
Yeah. I've been seeing a couple of sensory bottle comments already, actually.
Exactly. You can do this. Just make sure you help them tie it on or twist it on really tight.
Glue it tightly.
It is such a quick way to get that kid whose lid has been flipped or the owl flew away, to get them back online or calming down so they can then access the thinking part of their brain. But you don't want to reason with them until that happens. So they need a bag of tricks. The coloring sheets. Some kids love to color. Some can't stand it. I mean, to calm down. It's just, right? We're all different. The guided meditations are great. I know you guys use this in your classroom already. If you don't, there's a great website called therapyaid.com. It's got some really neat guided meditations there. The safe space, I say, because they've got to let us adapt, I say we each get yoga mats for our kids and let them
Ooh.
create their own safe space right next to their desk or the carpet. I don't think it'll be a carpeting, but yoga mat, you can wipe that easily. And then they get that, you teach them yoga. Yoga is amazing for your mind, body, and spirit, all of it.
That is very true. I do yoga daily. Otherwise, I find that work is just in my brain all day long. And then, of course, with being at home, like yourself, it's like you have to learn to turn off. So
yeah,
tons of great ones. Let's dive into a couple of the Q&A questions, though, that have been coming through, all relevant to what we're talking about. I've seen them going on here. A couple of people have mentioned that the yoga mat's a great idea. Let's start back with here. Got it. Sorry, I'm just going through to my notes here. So Sarah's asked, and of course, this might actually tie in really well to the like to your animals and the animal inside of me. What are some ways to de-escalate a child who's had a sudden burst of anger, potentially is upset, emotional, during play, to just kind of help them get down, and then of course talking them through it?
Awesome. Okay. Remember, you're not going to be able to talk them through it until they're online. So just keep that in mind, because then you're going to get more frustrated because they're not doing what you say. They're not being compliant, and that's frustrating. But it's important to understand, to ask yourself again, I wonder what happened. Use that calm tone of voice, get down to their level, sit with them and ask them for what they need. Ask them, what do you think you need right now, in the most loving, calm voice. And the other piece of that is all these strategies we're talking about. And somebody asked me to repeat that website, and it's therapyaid.com. And somebody also asked about the jar or the bottle. You put glitter in it and water, and you put the lid on really tight. And what you do when they're in this kind of mode, they flip their lid, you have them turn it upside down. You have them do it. It's important. They're being empowered when you have them do it. Have them turn it upside down and watch the glitter fall. And by the time that glitter falls, usually their brain is back online. And then you can talk with them. And again, ask them what they need. And even if they're 2 and 3, a lot of times they can tell you or show you what they need. And if you have that yoga mat with their personalized, bag of tricks right there, ask them, what do you think you need out of your bag of tricks to help you find your calm, or get the owl to come fly back, or whatever story you used to tell them, or, get back online. Yeah.
It's very true. And the other thing too, is going back to the bottle, is you can, if you want to make it a fun science experiment, you can also do like a little bit of oil in there, just vegetable oil, and it kind of makes it bubble up a little bit differently, but it moves a little bit faster. So just be aware of that. And put some food coloring in it too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say something that's really quick too, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. One of the things we understand through DBT, it's a therapeutic approach, is temperature change is really good for these kids. So if you have ice handy, have them put a little bit, if they're really worked up, this isn't for a kid who's kind of, this is more for a worked up kid. If they'll allow you
On the back
of the neck, have them do it, or ask them, do you want me to do it? But a lot of times they will be out of sorts. Try to get them to do it. Now, here's the key to all of this. You have everything in place, but you have to practice all of these before you do it, so that if you practice just like a game, right? I was a volleyball player. I practiced a million times so that when the game came, I was able to do it automatically. So if you practice with them when everything's calm and good, and a regular, like several times a day, okay, it's time to get your calm down jar, or it's time to choose something that you want to practice. You can get like a pipe cleaner. And with the little ones, you got to be careful with the pipe cleaners, right? Because they're pokey at the end. But there's ones that are really thick. They can just use it. You can take them if they do carpet time. It might be yoga mat time, or stay in your seat time.
Or,
right? Or stand up. Some kids give them the option of standing up, sitting down. Our bodies tell us different things. Let them just sit there and wrap it around their fingers while you're talking. If their focus is off, or if they're the kid who's poking the other kid, they have energy in their body that they need to release. Let them release. If you don't have any of those tools, ask them to sit there and twiddle their thumbs. They got to get that energy out of their body. Sometimes you can just say, okay, shake the energy out. And sometimes that helps a person come back to calm. I know there's a million, sorry.
Oh no, these are some great tips, and I'm sure like a combo of these are happening all over right now anyways, but on the same side, it's just that reminder. It's like, oh, it's almost like a light switch on, right? So when you think about why you're doing it versus and the process of it, and that's why I love talking about bringing these up. I want to ask, this is a really interesting question, and I don't know if you might fully the answer with it, but of course with families being remote right now, how do you have any recommendations about connecting with the children and just kind of maybe keeping that trauma lens while they're being remote right now?
Yeah, so notice changes in the kids. So again, try to always engage, try to connect with them. We get really creative as teachers. There's a lot of great programs out there. Any kind of like, Kahoot or whatever, anytime you can get them to engage and then use that time to ask questions. And then just try to pay attention to see if they've shifted their behavior or their tone of voice or their expressions, because that shift tells you a big story. And sometimes see, they're just distracted if you're looking at camera. But I'm telling you, from a therapeutic approach, we had to go remote online very quickly. And I was working with teenagers who were in residential treatment centers. And that shift went right online and we were still able to support them. So it's looking for the shift in behavior, the shift of tone, and really getting to know those kids. You can play lots of games with them online. Again, we don't have time to maybe go through all of those strategies. You guys are experts on that, though. Get creative, but just look for those changes, look for those shifts, and always be curious. I wonder what has happened or what is happening.
That's probably like the key takeaway. Before we go into our shout outs and everything, I wanted to ask, there's one more question because I saw it briefly go by here on the chat box about like the ACEs testing. I've never done it myself personally, but I have only heard about it. Can you maybe just go into a little bit more detail? Do you know anything off the top of where people can even look for it?
Yeah, easily just Google it. Do ACEs quiz.
Yep.
There's lots of them you don't have to pay for, so don't fall into that trap having to give an email or whatever for that particular one. It's all over the internet. Just do ACEs quiz. If you do ACES quiz. Yep. I did give that to you as a resource too. I gave that to you guys.
Come out, yeah.
There's just and a link. And then any of the work that I do, I always have an assessment that you can give kids, you can do with staff, again, just to see what's going on in your building. I mean, what if you have 60% in your building or 20% in your building? It's just good to have that data.
I definitely think I want to take the test just to see. Like, it just doesn't hurt to know, right?
Right. And they're simple questions. There's not many of them. And they're, some of them are very specific. Like, did you ever witness your mother in an abusive situation in the home? Some are very specific that way. So just check yourself too, because some of this can be very triggering to us, and just take care of yourself.
That's totally fair. Charlie, do you want to leave us with any last words of wisdom or piece of advice, or just a positive note before we dive into like our goodbyes? And we also have Charlie has a podcast, but I'll let her dive into that.
Yeah, you know what? Don't forget to take care of yourself and support each other. And the judgment out there is out of control. We are humans too. So I really want to make sure that you understand you're dealing with your own stuff, and you have to go back and do a job that is an unbelievable ask right now. So just support each other the best you can, and be very genuine and honest about how you're feeling towards something, and take care of yourself. And the other thing is, make sure you remember that these kids, they're little people. They are not adults. They don't have the capacity. It's our job to help them, and they can, no matter what they have faced in their life, they can, with our help, have positive neural connections as a result of how we treat them and show up for them.
Super powerful, Charlie. Super, super powerful. To tie into that, we always like to do a couple of shout outs. So we have a couple here. So Deborah, she's done the STAR trauma-informed resilient schools test course. I apologize. And so congratulations on doing that. You're obviously doing your homework. Teresa from First Nations here, Sims, I hope I'm saying that right. We sing and drum lullaby and heartbeat drumming. I always found that so cool. Like I'm not very good at it, but I found it so cool. So a couple of great shout outs there. I thought I had one more. It might've disappeared above. I think I got everybody here. before we let Charlie go and sign off for the day, tell us a little bit more about your podcast.
Okay. Yeah. It just came out of me being an educator and mental health professional too. And I just wanted to capture the essence of what people are out there doing to make this world a better place. And so I'd like to just highlight that and reach people on a massive scale. It's totally free. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to a podcast. It's Advancing Humanity. We've got a variety of topics. It's not just about this. It's just a variety, but it's really great. It's all about how we can advance humanity through connection, health, and innovation.
That is powerful. I love it. I love it. I'm definitely going to be looking for a couple of things before I take off later this evening to hit the road. Because flight, got to do what you got to do. Charlie, thank you. Like, there's so many thank yous, but thank you for joining us today. I know everybody in the presentation is saying thank you, that they're loving it. Here, the best webinar here. Oh, wow. Thank you. Charlie made it, guys. Let's bring Carmen on just so she can fill us in with a couple of the details before we sign off here for the rest of the day.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. You're all good, Carmen.
So I have shared the certificate with everyone in the file section. If you click on it, you should be able to download it. As usual, we'll also be sending that out to you guys via email. So simple, straightforward, business as usual on that front. We are also running our webinar next week that's going to be on diversity and inclusion, and that's going to be led by our lovely Ria and Kaya, both of our ECEs in-house, something that we're really passionate about here at Hi Mamas. So if you guys can tune in, same time next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. And I've just shared a link with you guys that's going to be a survey. We realized that a lot of people are going back to work, and we've really enjoyed hanging out with you over the past 16 weeks, and we want to hear from you. What kind of content do you want to learn about? Is there an alternative time that you'd like us to run sessions? Can we do reruns? So if you click on that, it's going to take 2 minutes of your time. Give us all that feedback. We'll take that away and we'll make these better for you guys. And thanks so much, Charlie. This was such an awesome session. It's the first one we've done on trauma. I learned a lot. I think Ria learned quite a bit. Like, I love the brain science part.
I learned a lot.
Had a ton of resource sharing too. So
I do have can I share a resource real quick? Because there's so many people listening who are leaders.
yeah.
I didn't even think about this, but it is like a free event that we're starting on Monday. There's 19 speakers. I do a whole session on this as well that dives into the brain science and things deeper. If anybody is listening and you're a leader and you'd like to do this, it's free. It's awesome people out there. It's leaders.solutions/Charlie, CHARLE, if you want to go sign up for it. I don't want you to miss it. I didn't want you to miss it. It's there.
Fantastic.
And I'm post a link for you guys too, just so
there you go.
You can attend that on Monday.
Thank you, Charlie, once again. This was super informative. I think really helpful for all those educators, all those teachers who are going back, or directors and owners who are thinking about their staff right now as they do go back and get into the nitty gritty of it all. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. So once again, thank you. Carmen is the stud behind in the background and is always amazing on the chat. So thank her as well for joining us. From everyone here at Hi Mama, as always, stay healthy, stay happy, stay safe, and we'll see you next week for diversity and inclusion. Diversion, that's what I'm trying to do.
Thanks,
Thursday, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Next time. Bye-bye.